So hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. I am so excited about today's webinar. I am delighted to have Colleen Redcroft Smith with me, and I can never manage to get out your entire name without burbling it, so I apologize in advance. She's going to be talking about navigating careers across borders, and she has personal and professional experience up to her neck in this. So we're in really great hands today. So without further ado, I'm going to stop screen. Oh, for goodness sake, my teeth need to be fixed in today. I am going to stop screen sharing and introduce you to Colleen. Hi, Colleen. How are you?
Hi, Rachel. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Possibly the worst introduction you have ever had professionally.
No, I think there's actually been worse, and it's fine as long as you can laugh about it. It's all good.
So you are a trained career consultant who who took your own career on an international adventure 10 years ago from Canada to the Netherlands.
That's right.
You're now working at CJS, or you have your own and founded CJS Careers. And I know you through FIGT, as I've known a lot of the guests on this, when you co-authored the current edition of Career in Your Suitcase with Joe Parfit. So tell me about that.
Well, when I took the career on the international adventure, I'd been working in Canada for about 8 years in the field. And when I moved here, I wondered if I'd be able to continue my career. And by applying the skills that I teach people in my workshops, I was able to do that within 2 years. And I was, again, delivering career development training, but this time in Dutch. And at a certain point, I said, in the Netherlands, you have to have more than one contractor to be a freelancer. And so I went looking for more contracts and started networking in English again. And that's where I met Joe Parfit. And through networking and conversations, one evening we ended up spending the whole evening at a networking event talking to each other. And I dared to share with her the idea that I'd had, this wild and crazy idea of writing a book about the experience of moving to the Netherlands. And she, of course, is somebody who believes everyone has a story that should be heard. And so she strongly encouraged me. And when we sat down to talk about it, she said, who would you like to be your audience? And I said, people. And what would you like it to be on? Careers, really specific. And that's when she said, I've got this book and it needs a 4th edition. It needs to be updated. Would you like to do that? And purposely coming up with an idea on my own was not going very fast.
That's so brilliant. It's I'm fascinated also that you managed to restart your career or rekindle your career after just 2 years, because that to me is, did you do a lot of preparation in advance, or did you start when you landed?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer, because you could say that the work I do prepared me for it, right? And I wasn't planning this move. I ended up falling in love with a Dutch man, and 6 months later I was here. So that's not a whole lot of planning time. And I'm sure many of you know these last minute moves happen, and all of a sudden you're in this whirlwind, and I was in the whirlwind of romance as well as the whole thing of picking up my life. And I came for 6 months in a temporary to see if it would work. And I never went back. After 3 months, we were engaged, and then life just continued forward. So in terms of preparation,
oh, we've lost your sound for a moment. I'm hoping it'll restart. I can hear you back again.
Okay. I can repeat. What's the last thing you heard?
So you were just saying about how you didn't necessarily, we just lost you to at the last bit, that you didn't actually, we're all used to these last minute moves.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because last week we were talking with Evelyn Simpson and Louise Wiles from Thriving Abroad, and they had done obviously the career and the accompanying partner survey, and they have come to value more and more the need for preparation if you know you're going to be, because they interviewed a lot of serial expats, and so that we need to be much more prepared. But it's interesting because there is this whole other group of us that don't always know that we're going to move, or aren't necessarily expecting. You don't know what to expect. So it's fascinating to talk to both sides of the coin. The you know, when you have preparation, you have the time, and you to have some really high quality conversations with your partner about expectations. But then there's the sort of other side. You're a love pat, aren't you? I've just realized.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
For those who don't know what a love pat is, it's one of those terms we give to people who have moved for love. They fall in love with someone from a different country and move. It's very exciting. It sounds far more exciting than my life, I have to say.
Well, it's funny how we always compare ourselves to others and think, oh, the other sounds much more interesting. Yeah. But yeah, it's nothing I ever aspired to in terms of becoming a love pat. I didn't purposely seek it out. But when it happened, I was ready to jump and take the plunge.
And fantastic that your chosen career supported that. I think that's one of the things that we have. And the theme that's running through a lot of these webinars is about, you know, putting ourselves in a position where we can make good choices, because so often we're in a position where we can't. So with that in mind, I am going to move on to the meat of this webinar in earnest, and get you to talk about the benefits and challenges of expat life for the people that you work with.
Well, obviously, I think this is something that a lot of you will say, of course, this is me. You move, you get the kids settled in school if you have children, you get the house sorted and boxes unpacked. But one thing that's often left in the bubble wrap is your professional identity. And that's often one of the last things that we attend to in making this transition. And I think that Rachel made a good point that if we're prepared, then when the time comes, we're ready to pull ourselves out of the bubble wrap, and we know better what we're going to do about it. Because once you do that, oftentimes, if you haven't prepared, you are hit by the struggle of realizing that you don't speak the language, so there's a lot of barriers there. Your qualifications may not be recognized in the country where you've moved. You should know already whether or not you have a work visa, but understanding what that really means for your opportunities is a process of recognizing that, and then understanding what it means to be out without that professional role is also something that will start to reveal itself to you when you kind of take for granted that role that you've had in the past that now is not a part of your identity in this new location, and people don't know those things about you. So there's that transition of the identity. And then there's the intercultural transition. So understanding your culture and how that's influenced your own expectations around life and the work roles. And that creates also different kinds of opportunities. And that's all on top of what everyone in the world is experiencing, which is a world of rapidly advancing technology, which is changing the way we work and how we work. The demographics, which are creating opportunities for people to work longer, opportunities for people to work with aging populations. There's also the demographic of a very large unemployed youth population. That's another thing that's all influencing how work is being created and formed. The economy has played a huge role, obviously, this last little while in terms of the crisis. And then there's the readiness of people to move around the world. So the globalization, also alongside of that is the outsourcing of work and the reshoring of work, where work is actually being brought back from an outsourced location. So all of these things are happening. We're also noticing that the long-term permanent contract with benefits is going into the minority, and people are going to be working more often short-term contracts and have multiple employers over the course of their working life. So all of these create a lot of challenges for finding work and navigating your path. but it also creates a lot of opportunities. They just come in different packages than they used to.
One of the things, as you were talking, that really occurred to me is that I'm thinking about how often we take the decision to move and to not work in alignment with our, children. We think, okay, this is a great time to have children, or our children are young, and so this is a great chance for them to see the world, to experience other cultures, other locations, other environments, and we'll just take a career break while that happens. And I think it's interesting because if we were in our home location, we would typically move to part-time. There's a more gradual slide, whereas I think with expat life, it's often billed as an all or nothing. And I think that's sometimes, for me certainly, very misleading, in that I have professional qualifications that wouldn't be valid anywhere that I've worked, anywhere that I have lived. And the time it would take me to validate those, and the cost would be negated by the frequency of our moves. So that was never really an option, going back to my former career. But I never for a minute really considered, finding some sort of part-time work that maybe was in the healthcare field that would support my professional identity in maybe the next location, or a few locations down, or at the position I'm at now, but that wasn't necessarily requiring of the actual certificate. I don't know if I've put that very well, but do you know what I mean? There's often roles that we can take on that might be aligned to our actual profession and that might support our resume in future years. But for me anyway, my impression is that as expats, we tend to bill careers as an all or nothing. And you've just listed so many reasons why it doesn't have to be that way.
It's, the expectations of what your experience of career has been. If you'll move to the next slide, Rachel, and the one after that.
I'm very biddable today.
So much.
I think that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, that is exactly what I'm looking for. The career path, I'd like to ask the audience, which of these is a more accurate reflection of the career path that you are currently finding yourself on? And I think a lot of times we have in our minds this myth that the ideal career path is path A. It moves in a nice upwardly progressing line, very predictable, and it just moves nice and smoothly and straightforwardly through the process from birth all the way through to death. And it's sequential. You have birth, school, work, eventually you retire, and then it's over. And that's the story. But the reality of everyone's careers looks more like B. And Rachel, would you agree with this for yourself?
Definitely. Mine has taken, even what I'm doing now has taken it's taken a much more organic pathway, definitely. And I look at the skill sets that I have now, and ironically, we were talking about this, I've almost come full circle, because I started, before I became an expat, I was in education. And so ironically, a lot of the skills that I have, that I developed there, and a lot of the practice that I was able to get there, are what makes doing what I do now so much fun and so much easier.
Yeah, and that speaks to the transferable skill sets that you've developed, that being a teacher, you can teach in so many different ways. It doesn't have to be within the formal education system. You can offer all kinds of different types of training and leading groups to help them learn without being an actual quote unquote teacher.
Yes.
And I think that that's so freeing when you realize that you can use those skills ethically and appropriately outside of those little boxes that we tend to put them in and define them as, this is the way it works in this career. And when you think about the career, oftentimes we feel like we're going in circles, but it comes around full circle, and then you see how it all connects. And we can only see that looking back. We can't see that looking forward. So we'll talk about the importance of what you can use to guide your way forward when you're on this crazy merry-go-round or roller coaster. But the other element I really wanted to point out is the importance of lifelong learning, because we're going to be retraining several times throughout the course of our lives now. And so this idea that school fits into that early part of our lives and then doesn't come back is also not accurate for today's world. With the rapid changes in technology and the way things are developing, you need to continually be learning. They call it lifelong learning. So being an expat and traveling somewhere is a great opportunity for you to do some more learning if that's what fits into your life at that moment, as opposed to paid work. So you can look at filling in elements to help you continue to grow and develop that way, even in a place where you are not officially allowed to work.
And that actually leads in nicely. You've talked about, in terms of implication, the focus on transferable skills, but the second one you mentioned was the awareness of needs and expectations around work and broadening the definition of what a career is.
Mm-hmm. Which leads us nicely to our next slide, which are actually 2 slides further on. I've covered this next one already. So we have a nice globe, and then we go to the definition of what we...
Good. Sorry,
What's
that was
that?
making sure I'm on the right slide for you.
Yes. So we're opening the book to understand what a career is. And when I use the word, I'm talking about it in a very holistic way. So I'm not just talking about paid work and a professional role. I'm talking about the combination of work, learning, and leisure. So looking at meeting the various needs that you have and the various skills that you have to apply them in different ways to make a whole picture, as opposed to saying, I must get all of my professional needs met or my needs to use these skills met through work only. It's important to look at ways you can meet those needs in a broader perspective. So we're also looking at paid and unpaid roles, which will include then volunteer roles. It's also looking at your personal roles. So saying the fact that you are caring for aging parents places a demand on your time, which makes a different scenario around what's possible for you in terms of other pieces of the picture, like work or volunteer work or learning activities. And what I really like about this definition is that it allows a lot of dynamism. It changes and it flows and it evolves. And so it's not a static thing, and it's not that predictable line going up. It's really your story unfolding, and you are the author of your story, and you are making choices which determine how the story progresses. And so it's looking at career from that perspective. So it maintains that element of professional, the professional piece, but it wraps your picture, which gives you many more opportunities and many more possibilities for yourself in the various settings in which you find yourself.
That's so true as well, because I know personally the voluntary work and the sort of, not necessarily hobby, but certainly the unpaid activity that I have done over the last 4 years has actually provided me with a really solid foundation for what I'm doing now, and makes my life now massively easier because I've created networks. And I think that's one of the things we forget that is such a huge part of careers, is that networking part, all those informal contacts that you make when you're in the workplace that are in your chosen activity area, for want of a better word, or chosen skill set area. You lose those. And I think one of the things that I've really noticed is that has had one of the most profound effects on my ability to work. The fact that actually was, even though I wasn't paid and even though it didn't feel like it was work, when I look back, and I also look at, other people who are working and how much time they spend networking, I was thinking, gosh, I actually spent a lot of time and a lot of effort, and it's now paying off. But at the time I didn't really see it. It's the hindsight thing, isn't it, again?
It is. And you've been continually planting seeds. And that's the way I like to look at networking, is you're out there, you're planting seeds, and you never know when one of them is going to germinate and start to sprout through the earth and raise its head so you can see it. But if you are continually planting seeds, then eventually some of those things do start to come back to you. And I think it's one thing we really like to emphasize with A Career in Your Suitcase is your network, you can take it with you now. You've got LinkedIn, you've got Facebook, you have some amazing tools to keep your network alive and keep you connected. When I moved to the Netherlands, people in Canada said to me, "Oh, I know someone who's working in the field there." And they gave me an introduction, and I went and met with these people, and some of them I was able to collaborate with. And I learned a lot from them in terms of how careers work in the Netherlands and how to sort of adapt myself here to the current environment. The networking is just an absolutely essential piece to moving forward as well. When I had done some of the language study, and I thought, okay, it's really time now to start moving in the direction of looking for those opportunities to use the language and my skills here, then I started networking, and I volunteered. I approached a volunteer organization and asked to use my skills in a way that I thought would be appropriate. They needed a fitness instructor, and it's something I'd done in university. So I thought, I know I can do it. It's a bit of a step back, obviously, but it's a good place to stand in front of a group and practice giving instructions in Dutch. So I went and applied on that, and they said, let us have a think. And when they came back, they said, we would like you to deliver a training to our volunteers on their competencies, which was a much better role for me and helped me make that step that I was looking to make in a much better way. So those kinds of things happen. And it was only 6 months after that I started volunteering in another location, which eventually brought me to my first paid contract. So when I looked back, I could see how it all just connected so beautifully and seamlessly. But at the time, I was just making it up and taking what seemed to be the next logical step by getting out there and meeting people and finding opportunities to put my skills into action and use them and develop them further.
Yes, and I know there will be a lot of people listening to this who have very, very dynamic, very high achieving, I'm trying to think of the word, but very effective volunteer roles, and who often say, it's not marketable. It's, but I'm not paid for it. And I think we underestimate just how small the gap between paid or unpaid and paid is. So, and I think that leads us nicely on to the 6 must-haves that you talk about.
Yes, these are the things that the strategies that we have, that we use, that I applied to myself, that Joe has used, that we want to share with you to help you find your way and navigate your way forward in your career, wherever you may be. And the first one is really to know yourself. Second, plug in, then navigate an uncharted path, recognize opportunity, connect, and adapt. And I'm going to speak to each one individually. So the first one is to know yourself, and that's really understanding the skills that you have, the information that you, the experience that you've developed, knowing about your hobbies, your interests, what really connects with you in a strong way in terms of your values, and is meaningful to you in terms of causes or activities. So you need to know those things about yourself. You also need to know how you like to work. What you need to be happy and settled. Joe just recently made a move to Kuala Lumpur. She may speak to this when she does her webinar in the next webinar that you have, Rachel. But she has a list that whenever she goes somewhere, she always has to create a writing circle, because she must write. She must find other writers to connect with. That's one of her lifelines. So she creates a writing circle wherever she goes. The other thing she does is find a walking buddy so she can go for walks, because she needs to get outside and get into some nature. And so those are 2 of the things that she absolutely needs to have. And so she knows about herself. If I don't put these things in place, then I start to go down that spiral into not feeling good about myself, not having the balance that's right for me. So you need to know what you need in order to keep yourself going. And that's really the starting point for our must-haves.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you, but it's so true that there is the one side where we are constantly letting people know that, you know, they need to know what they're capable of and what their skills are. But you're right, there is that other balance as well, knowing what you need to nurture yourself, because it's that recognition that this isn't easy and that you are figuring it out as you go along, and there are ups and downs. And so I think that's really, really sage advice going into it, because I think some of the time we give lots of steps and not assume, but we give the impression that it will all be easy and every step will be a logical next step upwards. And some of the time it's a bit of snakes and ladders, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah. Yeah. And I love the analogy that I've heard Norm Amundsen, he was a Canadian career counselor guru, use. And he talks about if you've ever played golf or tennis or a racket sport, in order to connect with the ball, you need to swing backwards. And it's that backswing that allows you to connect with the ball in the present with force and with accuracy, and to be able to direct where it's going to go. And so you need to have times where you swing backwards and you recollect, you think about what you have. You feel like you're not going anywhere, but that backswing is really essential to preparing yourself and to building up your momentum in order to be able to move forward.
And those of us working in our own businesses and in our own areas will be really familiar with that. Sometimes you really feel like you're going backwards.
Yeah, yeah. Another thing, obviously, is to plug in, and this leads nicely from knowing yourself, because if you don't do the things you need to do in order to keep your energy up and to keep yourself engaged, you will end up running yourself down. Your little Energizer Bunny battery is going to run out at some point if you're not feeding yourself the kinds of things you need in order to feel good about yourself, to do things that are meaningful to you, to engage your interests, and to be connected with other people. And that's important, is to connect with other people so that we can that's where we learn a lot about ourselves, is through those interactions with other people. So that's a really essential part of it too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So tell me about, sorry, I was going to say the next one you've got is navigate an uncharted path. But so tell me about this slide.
Yes, well, those explorers who adventured across the world before there was such a thing as GPS or any kind of electronic means of communication, they had was their fixed point that allowed them to find their way. That was their reference point to see, am I on track? Am I going in the direction I need to be going? And you need to find that for yourself. That's really important for you, finding your direction, because you saw the career path of today. It's really an uncharted path. You're doing off-road travel. There is no map that will tell you step by step exactly where you need to go. So you are really making it up as you go. And I think that that's an important thing to be aware of, is that there's nobody who can tell you exactly what your next step should be. You're going to figure it out as you go along. So it's identifying that North Star, which is really essential. And that North Star is made up of, and Rachel, is the 4-circle slide next?
There you go.
Lovely. Ta-da! There in the middle, you'll see the star. And that's our North Star that I was just referring to. And you'll see in this slide, it's referring to that as your purpose. And this slide is a really nice summary, I think, of all those elements that need to be brought together to help you find your way and to find that focus, to draw yourself forward. So it's combining that information about knowing yourself, so that which you are good at, your skills and experiences, that which you love, your interests, and your hobbies, and the causes which are close to your heart, and your values. And then you go out and look out into the world and try to understand what the world is needing and where all of that intersects with those other pieces, those other 2 circles. And then the final piece, which for some of you may be optional. You may be in that luxurious place where you can say, the income isn't the most important thing for me right now. The most important thing for me right now is to be doing those things that I love in a way that benefits the world in which I'm living. So you could say, I'm lucky, I only have to find the intersection of 2 or 3 of these circles and not all 4. But if you are looking for paid employment and you need to supplement the income, then you also have to find that place where all of those things combine to actually create a paycheck or an income as well.
I think you've made the point as well with the with your analogy about the your story about becoming a fitness instructor again, and that step back is that the North Star changes. You sort of, I find, well, and maybe I have a feeling I'm not unique in that, and especially when we move, that you have an idea in your mind of where you really want to be and what you want to be doing, and then it might change. 3 years, 5 years, your family situation. I know what I was hoping for. My expectations when my children were smaller are very different to those now, because they don't, seriously, they have no interest in spending time with me anymore. Whereas when they're younger, you know that they need you so much more, and you have so much greater role. And I always recognized that whatever I did had to balance with that sense of I don't know any mother that has ever managed to get away from it, but that sense of guilt of, you know, when it comes to the conflict between watching your child play soccer and you know, going into work for an afternoon shift. We always feel that guilt. And so I needed to find something at that point. My North Star, that was one of my, I guess it comes into that which you love. It took the edge off because there were other things in my life that meant that where I wanted to be or what my North Star was very different. Now, I would say I'm much more ambitious and I'm willing to take more risks because I can, because there's less, you know, it's my time that's being lost as opposed to my time with my children that's being lost.
Yeah. Yeah, it is important to allow yourself some flexibility to let that balance shift and evolve with the different life roles. And that's why that's another important part of that definition of career, because it has to balance out with all those things that are important to you. And like you, when my son was born, I went from wanting to work 3 days a week in Dutch delivering training, and I said, I'm now only available for 2. And that wasn't enough for them. So then I launched into this new state of having to build my networks to create new opportunities. And that's when I came across Joe. Was shortly after my son had been born, and I was in that state of figuring out what came next. And so you're going around that circle many, many times in your life, and each time you go around it, you can come out at a different place. Your interests, your values, they tend to stay fairly constant. You can add new interests, and some interests fade away, but there's certain elements of them which are very, very consistent, and that really does help to give you that grounding sense of, as long as these elements are in place, then I've got the foundation of what I need, and then the other bits I can juggle or shuffle a bit.
I'm also fascinated by how profoundly people's skill sets change as well during these times, because it's just so funny, even knowing people for, you know, for 5 years, you watch the expats that we know, you watch how their skill sets adapt and change, and I guess that leads us nicely into the opportunities, recognizing opportunities, because I think that's probably what's happened with a significant number of them.
Indeed. And that's again, you've got that star, you've got that focus, but you can't put the blinders on and say it has to be only this and has to look exactly like that. You need to keep your focus, your vision wide, because oftentimes it comes along in a form or shape that you didn't actually know would be it until it kind of looked you right in the face and you saw, you know, you picked it apart and you said, oh, look inside, there are those elements I'm looking for. I wouldn't have looked for it in this packaging, but there it is. And what a lovely surprise that is. And so it's really important to have those elements, know what they are, and kind of, I always talk about it as creating a grid, a framework in which you can rate opportunities against to see whether or not they have those elements that are important to you. Because oftentimes we try to squeeze ourselves into something, a specific role or something with a specific title. And I think it's one of the benefits of the expat life and moving and having this opportunity to sort of reinvent yourself along the journey is that you can find different opportunities that you would never have found otherwise and create all kinds of new possibilities because of that. But if you remain stuck on a specific definition, as in your case, Rachel, a teacher is a teacher and only teaches in a school, therefore I cannot teach because I'm not allowed to work in a school, then you've really, really shut off a lot of things. But if you unpack that teacher role and find out what the most important elements of that role were for you, the most meaningful and fulfilling, then you can find ways to use those skills and find those kinds of opportunities, but in different settings that are not controlled or regulated.
Yes, the one thing I wanted to put in before we move on, and I know we talked about it when we were doing the sort of run through of all the slides, was that actually you have to be discerning with your opportunities too, because frequently we were laughing and saying, you know, PTAs are so skilled at finding new parents and welcoming them, which is wonderful, but you also then get sucked into the volunteer roles that aren't necessarily in alignment with what it is that you are looking to do. And 2 years later, you find you've been the chair of something that really, and you could have been doing something that was much more aligned with your North Star.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's the same thing, actually, that people in retirement often face too. They fill their time because they think, I've got lots of time. And so they fill it all without giving a lot of thought to what do I need and what's important to me and what will create a balanced life for me. So yeah, just doing anything, any opportunity that comes along isn't necessarily going to be the right mix for you. And sometimes we're just, if you let it get this far, you're just so thankful to have something. And great, if that's where you're at, then that's a good starting point. But do take the time to figure out what is the right mix for you. What are the skill sets you want to grow? That's something that we emphasize in the Career in Your Suitcase approach is to say, look at the skills you want to recycle, the ones you want to put away and pack away that you don't want to use anymore, the ones that you want to grow. And so you're looking at using them in different ways. You can also, the reuse one takes old skills and uses them in a new way. So there's lots of potential if you think creatively and use this type of a way of thinking when looking at your skill sets and the opportunities that come along.
Okay. So,
and that brings me to one of the crazy skills that I love. And it's something I learned in improvisational theater, which is theater on the spot. For those of you who haven't ever watched, in the United States, there was a program called Whose Line Is It Anyway? That was very popular in the 90s. And there's other programs. There was one in the Netherlands that was also very popular. But when you look at life today, it really is so much more improvisation than it seems to have been, or we like to think it was in the past, because that line is not a straight line. And so you're having things come along and you have to decide what to do about them. And the skill in improvisational theater is to accept an offer and to advance it. And the easiest way to do that is to say yes, and you don't just sort of say a bland or a non-committal, yeah, all right. It's a yes, and, because when you respond that way, you create energy on stage and the audience engages. And this momentum helps to carry the scene forward and helps the plot and the narrative develop. And that's, of course, what we want in our own life too. So if you get these opportunities, like to join the PTA, and you're saying no to everything, then you're going to stagnate your life, and the opportunities are going to start to slow down, and maybe they won't be coming as often. So one of the nice things you can do is to say yes, and with the and, you can just sort of guide it a little bit in the direction that's more acceptable to you. But in improvisational theater, if you're standing in front of the big dark cave and you don't know what's inside, and the person on stage with you says, should we go in? And you say yes, and let's bring our big bats. But let's prepare ourselves with something that we can use when we go in and we discover what we discover. And you never know. I mean, you could walk in and it could be, you know, some sort of really cool posh bar, right? Or lounge. Who knows what's in that deep dark place? It could be something completely unexpected.
Our new motto for expat life, I think. And
yes, and into the deep dark cave you go.
So on to connects and adapts. Tell us
yes,
about this.
I've kept the last two in one slide together, and it's because this is a picture of a group of birds. They're starlings in the north of in Scotland, and what they do is they tend to come together in the evening and form these incredible formations. And they swoop and they swerve and they almost land, and then they go shooting back up in the sky. And it's just amazing to watch this happen. If you Google the word murmuration, because that's the actual technical term of this formation, murmuration, M-U-R-M-U-R-A-T-I-O-N, then you can see this in action. And this is from and it's played with the Pachelbel's Canon in D in the background. So it has this lovely calming music. And what's really cool about this group of birds is that there is no leader. So there's just a group of birds randomly flying about and swooping about. So they're connected. And the reason they connect is because it actually protects them from birds of prey. And so it keeps it safer. It makes the journey safer for them in the evening hours when the birds of prey are out. And so they swoop and they swerve about and they find what they need and they support each other. And I thought, what a lovely image this is for us, all of us, on these adventures, living these crazy lives, that we're all sort of one of these members of this big formation, and we're all swooping and swerving together. And so if you think of your network that way, being there to protect you and you to protect them and to help each other find what you need, then I think you have a really beautiful image for what it means to be networked and to be connected with other people. And I strongly believe in the power of networking and in the power of collaboration. And so connecting with Rachel today is another form of collaboration. Working with Joe on A Career in Your Suitcase is another collaboration. I work with another colleague I met through the Women's Business Initiative International in The Hague, and we plan expat events in Rotterdam together. We have all of these different collaborations going on, and it makes it so interesting and so vibrant and so alive. And that's what you see in this image. And the other thing that I love about this image is that they're constantly adapting to each other. So as there is no leader, it's not like they can just follow one, but they sense somebody's coming a little closer, and so they just adapt. And the scientists who've studied these formations have never seen the birds crash into each other. And I think that's amazing, because they're going at great speeds as they swoop and swerve about, and yet somehow they keep track of each other and where they are in the midst of the others, and they don't crash into each other. So there's this constant adaptation that happens to allow this formation to keep moving and swerving and swooping around.
That's a really lovely analogy. I love it. I'm sort of sitting here soaking it in quietly. So those are your 6 must-haves. You also talked about your CIS way. Now, oh, sorry. Now I'm going to skip back, because you talked about your 3 tools. And I think I'm putting those in the right place. So please correct me if you want to talk about the CIS way first, or the 3 tools that can support your career on an international adventure before we skip on, because I know you wanted to talk about them.
Yes. The tools that I wanted to talk about, I wanted to put it in this context of the fact that this process that you're on, you know, what do you do if these things all of a sudden don't seem to work? That's a challenge. Oh, the 3 tools. Here we go. The one tool was the yes and that's that one side. The other tool that I really wanted to bring up in terms of recognizing opportunity and helping you to navigate that uncharted path, you have to become sort of a navigational expert in your field or in the area that you want to find opportunities in. And one of the best ways to do that is to just watch the news, read the newspaper, or even better, get out and talk to people and ask them what they're experiencing and what they're seeing. And when you look at a headline in the news and you see this company is reorganizing and so many jobs are being lost, and that's a common headline we see today, it's easy to take it and say, oh, negative news, there are no jobs. There are fewer and fewer jobs out there. But the real information you have to dig a bit deeper for, because I love the saying, whenever a door closes, a window opens. And so whenever some jobs are lost in one place, others are being created in another place. And so when you look at the big picture of the economy and industry in the world, and you see what's happening, and you look at a headline, for example, in the last couple weeks, it's been big news that Volkswagen messed with the
oh yes, the emissions.
With the emissions. And so they had all these tests that produced bogus results, or results that weren't actually real. And so, okay, so what do you do with this information? Where do you go with that? And so, okay, what actually flowed into that situation to make it happen? That's one source of information for you. What came alongside of that at the same time that said, okay, it's time to blow the horn on this? Because now we actually hear things like, yeah, we've known for years that those aren't real. The statistics they share in that little summation of what this car can do isn't accurate. They know that at all the car shows, sales pitch. So they've never actually taken them literally. And so there's this sort of, okay, so what actually caused the whistleblowing at this point? And so something shifted and something happened. So understanding what happened there to create that moment where all of a sudden it's, oh no, it's news, right? This is a big catastrophe for Volkswagen and they have to call all these cars back. So where are the opportunities being created as a result of this? And when you think of industry sectors, you can think of the legal industry sector, right? And that's not just lawyers, that's also administrative people to support the lawyers who are going to be prosecuting or doing whatever things they need to do in order to follow through on the rulings that have come out based on this. Then there's going to be the consultants who come in to improve the situation and get better tests that produce reliable results, right? Then there's, even on the ground, there's all of the transportation logistics to do the recalls, right?
I was laughing because I was
and the extra support garage implementing these changes. So when you start thinking this way, then you start to see where that news event is creating opportunities and going to create opportunities, and you can position yourself. And so being on the ground in your local community, reading the local paper, that's what I did when I found my first volunteer role. I was practicing my Dutch and reading diligently and looking up words. And I found this charity that really resonated with my values, and I followed up on it. So that news is really your labor market information. That's where you're getting the cutting edge, fresh from the press information that if you can process it this way, you'll be able to get to those hidden job opportunities, the hidden job market, and actually create opportunities for yourself by applying that and positioning yourself for when those opportunities become available.
That's very pertinent for me, because the Global Girls Guide is created out of exactly that. Because I was going to, reading blogs and having been an expat long enough to see marital breakdowns and knowing people who are going through it, and then talking to people about some of the more extreme examples, and then trying to find solutions and realizing there didn't appear to be any that I could find. And it was those sort of things that's exactly what started the Global Girls Guide, because I could sense that there wasn't certainly easy to find advice or easy to find preparation or anything that sort of was raising awareness of it. So interesting. Yes, it's very true. And I was laughing because recently there was an article on the BBC app that said something like 3 million cars are going to be recalled to have something done to the engines. And all I could think was there are mechanics the world over going,
Excellent. Yes. So maybe it's the mechanics who tipped the scales and said, wait a minute.
Well, I believe, my understanding is that actually, although Volkswagen have been, highlighted as using specific technology, it's across the board that emissions aren't what they appear in all of the cars, because they're tested on such artificial circumstances, apparently. There we are. And this is the end of my knowledge on that whole subject. So I'm going to move on.
Mine too. I'm done.
Okay, so to just recap, your 3 tools were to say yes and to understand the opportunities locally. Now, what was number 3? Because I keep interrupting you, I'm sorry.
That's good, because we haven't got there yet. We skimmed over, and I wanted to come back to it, so this is perfect. And this is a tool that I found absolutely essential to helping me through the transition. And it relates to the must-have of knowing yourself. Oftentimes, when we make these moves and you've engaged in it for a little bit, you start to lose touch with that sense of who you were, that professional identity, and that conviction, that belief in yourself that you are capable of still doing those types of things and producing those kinds of results. Because the longer you're away from it, and this also goes for moms and parents, right? If you've put that role higher and taken a step down in your work life, then it's hard to readjust that and to reconnect with that part of yourself. And so I found one of the best tools was to have, and it's just a little book that I have where I have my CV in it, but I also have my certificates and my diplomas and degrees, and any kind of that type of piece of paper that I gained ever in my life goes in there. And it can be a box. It doesn't have to be nicely organized, but that you have a place where it is. And I have my first workshop hand in Dutch, which was a huge achievement. That's in there too. I've got my a thank you note from clients can go in there. I have the story of getting my Dutch driver's license, which I wrote up in terms of a STAR story, which is a common acronym used in career development. And I really strongly encourage people to write the stories of their experiences and their life so that they've got that in there too. And when I found myself, I was actually filling out an application form to work in sort of a department store, like a cheaper version of IKEA. And I was actually, it was so difficult to fill it in because I felt like I was chopping off pieces of myself in order to fit into their application form. And I flipped through my portfolio and I saw the things that I had done in Canada before. And I thought, no, this is what I really want to do. This is so important to me. I'm going to make the effort to make another call, to apply one more time, to do one more networking thing, to keep trying all those things. And stay the course and not give up on it. I mean, working in a department store could have been a chance to practice my Dutch, but it really didn't feel like it was a move in the direction I really wanted to go. It was something to do while I was developing the language skills.
It's that treading.
I'm so glad.
Don't you think?
I'm so glad I didn't have to.
We do a lot of treading water.
Yes.
We just keep ourselves afloat and just bobbing along, but not really getting anywhere. Just
yeah. So just picture yourself sort of treading water, bobbing along, but holding onto that portfolio, which is a flotation device, which will help you find your next shore or your next bigger flotation device. Something that will help keep you afloat and keep you buoyed up when you're lagging and we're short of being able to believe in yourself. Because we forget those pieces when we start to go down. Then you need to have something to refresh your memory about those things. And I did find it to be a lifeline. Lifeline.
Yeah, I would agree entirely because my son is now in college, but we had a similar experience in that he had to apply to college and you have to, list all these things that you've done. And it's incredible. There are sort of the logistical points that it's incredibly difficult to remember. You do need it from an emotional point to keep you uplifted, but also from a practical perspective, I think you never know when you are going to have to work, when you are going to have to step up and potentially, provide a household income. And I think the people who have, a LinkedIn profile with, you know, that they keep updated with their story, and a resume, and that sort of, and their certificates to hand, have a massive advantage over the rest of us who just have, you know, forgotten and put them in a box somewhere and forgotten about them. We don't, in fact, we probably don't even keep hold of them. We've got them in storage somewhere.
Yes, that is a danger. You can have an online portfolio. It can be in the cloud. You know, it doesn't have to be pieces of paper, but I did like the tangible turning of the pages. That helped me as well. But in terms of Lifeline, definitely, it's your master CV. It has all those bits in it. And in those points when you start applying for work, even if, and it's, well, especially if you're in that position of, I have to work, I must find something, this sort of adds this level of desperation to it. And that really affects your ability to think clearly and to remember those things that you did. And like I said, we're not working for one employer anymore with a personnel department that keeps track of all the things that you've ever done in your career. So you're going to have to do that for yourself. So do yourself the favor of just having a place. And then whenever those things come in, you pop them in there. And when you need to leaf through it, when you need that moment and you need to refer and find those specific dates and the name of the institution or whatever it was, it's all right there, and it makes it such an easier process than if you have nothing. So give yourself that gift of the portfolio.
Definitely. So tell us more. I know I've kept you talking about for us in general, but tell us more about the Career in Your Suitcase way.
Thank you. I'm happy to do this. We are so excited about this. Joe's book, A Career in Your Suitcase, came out in 1998 in the first edition. And in 2013, we created the fourth edition together. And at that point, we were debating, and Joe has heard all along the way that it would be really handy if it was a workbook. And so what we've done with the Career in Your Suitcase way is we have a workbook now. It's 25 steps to a career in your suitcase. And we created that because people told us that they would like more guidance. They would like more of a process to guide them through how the Career in Your Suitcase way works. And so we designed this, but we didn't want to just sell another book. We wanted to embed it in a process that supported people, that built other people into the process, because we know that we need other people to work through this well. And so what we've done, if you'll click the slide again, Rachel, is we've created a workshop to start off with. Then you work through the workbook on your own, the 25 steps. And during that time you're working through it, we come together again with 6 Blue Sky groups for support. And those are simply gatherings of people who will say, feedback, good information about yourself, give you encouragement, share from their experience. And when you get stuck or others get stuck, you can help each other out. And we created this because we know that there are so many of us who buy a gym membership and we go diligently for the first 3 months, and then somehow we get stuck, things interfere, and we fall away from that initial commitment. And so we built people into the process so that we can be accountable to each other and we can support each other through it, because we didn't want to sell a workbook that people started and didn't finish. We really wanted to support people to finish it well and carry it all the way through. And it is hard work, and it is grueling, and it unearths a whole bunch of things. So you really want to do it within that community and that support. We have a closed Facebook group where lots of great things are being exchanged. And then to finish off the process, we a one-to-one coaching session just to make sure that we've supported you to the best of our abilities. So this is what we call the Career in Your Suitcase way, these 5 elements all together. And we're super excited about it. It's in the beta launch stage right now in Kuala Lumpur, in Singapore, and here in the Netherlands, in Delft and The Hague. And the feedback we're getting is very affirming that we are on the right track, and it's making a difference for people to help them find their way forward in their career and navigate it across these international borders.
I'm sure, because we're all looking. A lot of the time we are all a little lost. We don't know. You talked a lot of the thing in your challenges of the international career navigation, and in your, you know, your 6 must-haves, for instance, the idea of having a North Star. And it sounds so simple, doesn't it? And it is really key advice, but often that doesn't come easily. And it really helps to have people around you that can help you talk through it, and somehow, yeah.
Which actually leads to the next slide, which is one of my favorite quotes right now. And it's a Zulu proverb, which is, a person is a person because of people. And so, yeah, don't go it alone. Make sure that you connect with other people and build that community of support around yourself in some way. Reach out to other people and support each other, because we really do need each other to make our way through all these crazy transitions on the expat international journey.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think you have hit the nail on the head when you say about we all need one another, because if there's one thing that I have learned, it's what a fantastic community we have with expats, and how supportive they are, and actually that, yes, you can find whatever you need if you reach out. So yes, thank you so much for joining us. I greatly appreciate your time, because you have given us some fantastic information to work with. For those of you who are watching live, there will be a follow-up email with the replay details. And what I will do is reach out to Colleen and get her to give me slightly more information on how to contact her if you want to find out more about the CIS way. I'll be sharing emails with Colleen so that you can, if you wish to find out more, she can reach out to you. If you don't want to receive emails, feel free to unsubscribe. There is from ours as well. But I just like to hand on people's emails so that you can actually get the information, because let's be honest, you've come to see Colleen, not me. With that, I will finish the broadcast and we will stop the call. I will speak to you soon. Bye-bye.